It's one after, so let us get going. So welcome to Monday Live. I am Anto Budiarjo, and I'm going to share some slides to get us going. So this is Monday Live, a show we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Really, our mission is to just help us in the BAS industry get through the pandemic and figure out what's on the other side for commercial buildings. The profile of the group is on mondaylive.org. And also, just as a reminder, the views expressed in this hour are our personal views, not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and comments on the Zoom tools and complete the survey at the end of the show. Just a reminder that this slide deck is on the homepage of mondaylive.org if you want to get any of the links that we'll be talking about during the show. So the agenda for today, we'll spend some time at the beginning just to talk about what's going on. But the main part is really having a discussion about what can and what should we do as the industry. What can we do now specifically to help buildings be occupied in the short term. Before we get into all of this, just go through some slides. I came across this article in the Atlantic. They want to talk about ventilation, and I thought this pull quote is really sort of interesting. How is it that 6 months into a respiratory pandemic, we are still doing very little to mitigate airborne transmission? I thought that was a little bit of a call to action to us, so you may want to read that, and that sort of sets up this show quite nicely in terms of the topic we're going to talk about. Roger's not going to be with us today, but he's talking about the industry in the UK. Strong growth in the past month, but after a lot of significant declines. So there's both good and bad news here. John talking about drive-through theaters in retail parking lot, which is kind of interesting. And Jim Butler talking about some bright news for travel in the future with no check-ins and no security lines. That's kind of interesting. Anna talking about Cushman and Wakefield again, and also about Google's initiative that would be interesting to have a bit of discussion about that at some point. And Ken is talking about his August issues, obviously on trust, and I'm sure he'll mention other comments beyond that. And so with that, I'm going to throw it back to the group. Who wants to kick off?
We have to talk about Jim Lee's beard.
Okay. That's not on the agenda.
Oh.
It comes and goes. Comes and goes.
I'll throw something out there. The two things I highlighted on the slides really revolved around the theme that we had started talking about some number of weeks ago, repurposing, right? You have these parking lots are open at night, repurpose them into drive-in theaters. You have these buildings that have been used for one thing, repurpose it. There's news today, Amazon was looking at, somehow securing defunct Sears and JCPenney stores as local, logistics centers for shipping, right? Repurposing. And, we were talking about repurposing very early on when we started this whole meeting. So I see these all just as examples of evidence of substantial repurposing of the real estate marketplace. It's happening in very different ways, though, right? Who would have thought I'm going to go to the Walmart parking lot tonight to watch a movie at 9:30?
So I'll throw this interesting statistics things I just saw earlier, maybe about 10 minutes ago, that the conference board just completed a survey of roughly 1,300 CEOs and C-suite executives, and some of the outtakes from that is that companies will be using more contract workers and fewer permanent staff as a result of COVID. A couple other things that kind of noteworthy from this was that they're using the pandemic to create a leaner organization. That they're going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to go ahead and do that. Many have been looking at trying to do that for some period of time now. And that those who feel that they're going to get by all this have embraced digital transformation and starting to rethink digital transformation as a whole. Now, if you take what we all do, we, a sense, are in this digital transformation world, obviously, albeit through buildings in the built environment. But I just thought some of those things were kind of interesting from some of the latest things I've seen.
You know, Mark, that would be consistent with what we saw after the recession or during the recession too, right? Downsizing, the use of contract employees, all of that kind of stuff was, you know, kind of the go-to game plan, I think, for a lot of companies. The hire back after the recession was very slow compared to the reduction in the workforce. And it would seem that that would be the case with the exception of a few industries, notable industries here this time too, so far.
Yeah, I think that we brought it up when we talked about the high-tech companies earlier, that this is a great opportunity for them. And, you know, the negative way to put it is they're turning just more of their staff into Uber drivers, that Uber approved, you know, that you can own your own infrastructure and we can be the platform on top of that. I think definitely the tech companies are looking at that. And they were already, I think John brought an early article with Sundar Pichai of Google saying something like 50% of their workforce was already contract workers. It's quite sublime to actually get a job at Google. That our next generation is contracting a lot more than they're getting full permanent jobs.
So Therese, is that a good or a bad thing?
I think it's good for Wall Street. You know, I think that it is, what we don't see is that these big tech companies have made the promise, you know, unstated that in all of our 401ks that they're going to double in value consistently over, you know, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. And in order to keep getting that growth, things like this have to happen. You just can't have, when they're already such behemoths, that they will have that kind of growth. And then when Wall Street no longer sees them as growth companies, well, then what are they? They don't have any hard assets. They're vulnerable. So it is I think I see it as bad because I have young children. You know, like I have children that I care about the next generation. And but for the tech companies themselves, they see it as good.
So I get that from a point of view of looking at balance sheets and all that stuff. Consider the possibility that, and I also have children, that the days of pensions are long gone. That was the last generation anyway. 401ks are going to be available or some mechanism for investing for the future. So imagine a generation of professionals who are now going out and eating what they kill, and the strength and creativity that's going to bring rather than taking someone who might sit for 25 years in an organization because they don't have any other or they're afraid to move on. I think that there's real possibility that comes out of this. A modernization of a workforce, I actually think it's modern, but then again, any of us could take any view, any side of the coin of all of these issues. I understand that.
Yeah, just
you use one of my favorite metaphors, the eat what you kill. I think that industry that's been architectural, engineering, construction has been very much an eat what you kill industry. And then when we had the tech companies coming in, and especially the VC funded startups, that they're in the world of dance for other people's money. And when you're in the world for other people's money, it is so different than eat what you kill. Mm-hmm. But I think the world is starting to open up. I'm certainly watching Density.io Kleiner Perkins put a lot of money into earlier startups and then flipped them to Siemens eventually, which also did density. But that little coconut trick that goes on, don't watch the coconut shells, that this is $2 billion for Nest thermostats. And then you watch Nest thermostat, 6 weeks later, most of the staff leaves. 2 years later, Tony Fadell leaves. Now they're doing ADT. Where was the $3.2 billion? $3.2 billion went from the pocket of Google shareholders into the pocket of Kleiner Perkins when they're all chummy because they invested in each other earlier. And that was like, presto changeo, that's how other people's money is used.
Got it.
Welcome to Big Business Finance, Teresa. Therese.
Yeah, I wonder if this is just another sign of companies trying to be more agile, just as they probably will be with their real estate in the future.
Yeah.
And I also wonder what that does to the labor and skill in our industry, because one of the things that I've heard consistently over the past few years in building automation is the shortage of the right kind of skills. So maybe this is a way of actually not addressing that, but maybe to some degree address it anyway.
Are you suggesting that it'll add to the skills or force a change in the skills, or?
Well, just the ability for more agile and more flexible skills to come into this space may actually be a good thing, because it's not. And one of the good thing about the sort of the gig economy, the 1099 economy, is that it's the flexibility of it. So.
Yeah, to me, it really just depends on if you look at this from an employee side of things or the employer side of things, right? I mean, clearly from the employer side, if you can keep your fixed overhead lower and scale quickly for projects and so forth, that is far better to your cash flow, your balance sheet. But if you're an employee, not having that regular income coming in and having to go out and hunt and kill, as we're talking about, you know, a lot of people in this industry who do, you know, the hands-on work aren't necessarily sales and marketing people. And all of a sudden they're going to find themselves having to sell and market themselves and their skill sets. So, you know, the one thing I've seen in other industries though is effectively, you know, these online Uber for skilled labor of various kinds. You know, we already use a couple of services for relatively unskilled labor. You know, if we need a technician to go power down and power up a box or run a little new cable for a unit or something, you know, we just go online and hire somebody local there. It's really easy and it works really well. Way more cost effective than us trying to staff, you know, all over the country. So
a couple of things there, Tracy. First of all, so I want to respond to two things you said. You used a little bit of a trigger word called regular income. I think that's from the last century. I think that there's a subset of people who are not going to have regular income. Frankly, they don't want it because they want to get in their RV and they're 28 years old and they want to go for 2 months to Yellowstone, and then they want to come back and make 2x what they'd make on regular income. The second thing, for the people who aren't skilled marketing people, like you suggested earlier, they've now got platforms like you yourself are using where they don't have to be skilled marketing people and they can find work. So you've kind of answered both sides of it right there.
yeah. It is. It's the whole thing, you know, it's free market at its best, right? There are companies that are working out all the holes and the problems and the services needed. And it's happening. And if you think back pre-pandemic even, the things that they were talking about to young people coming out of college in terms of their resumes and how to prepare to find work and so forth, the verbiage was already well embedded into all those conversations about you know, think of yourself as a corporation. It's no longer you're going to go to work for IBM and work there the rest of your life or for the next 20 years. You need to always be thinking of yourself as your own company, your own corporation in everything that you do. So that mentality was already started long before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And as with other things that we've discussed in this forum, it would seem the pandemic this is just another example of how it's become an accelerator.
So let me throw this out at you. So think of it differently. Think of it as a customer out in the marketplace, and you find that somebody that you want to do business with, you're going to purchase their technology, purchase their solution. And it comes, well, they've got a load of contract folks. Again, nothing wrong. Do you worry that they're just contract folks and they don't have the folks there who are actually committed to the long-term benefit, the health, the growing, creating that technology to support you?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. One is no, because it won't necessarily be the same resources doing the stuff. But then again, there's a bigger pool of resources that can actually not replace, but it's just sort of an ongoing pool. It's just like, I don't really care which Uber driver or Lyft driver comes and pick me up. It doesn't matter.
But to me, Uber is to get you from point A to point B, but you're buying a piece of technology that you're going to put in your building, your business. It is something vital. You want to keep the risk down. You're buying that for the business value, the business outcomes, and all that. And having committed full-time, whatever you want to call them, folks who are building that, supporting that, and creating the next version of that, to me speaks volumes versus, okay, yeah, I've got this somebody and they're doing it for 6 months and then they're moving on.
Well, that depends on the price, Mark.
Our customers.
Say again, Anno, or somebody.
Our customers who have facilities and manage them, how much are they going to avail themselves of outsourced services, Mark? You have a good point there, but these guys are running operations. They want to train a staff. They want to keep them on board. Do they want to deal with multiple independent contractors?
Again, I'm not talking contractors. I'm talking about the technology, the solutions that are going to go into my building or owners or operators.
So maybe this will be a nice topic for another Monday Live, the sort of the skill side of it that's sort of come up regularly. So, but I think I propose that we move on to our core topic of the day. We have two guests that I'm going to bring on stage or on the virtual stage, if I can click the right buttons here. Rick Ralston and Paul Wickberg. And let's start with Paul, because I have your slide up next. So if I can, so this is kind of a case of another sort of repurpose kind of side of things. Paul, why don't you sort of introduce yourself briefly and give us a bit of an insight of the project you're working on and how this can potentially be applicable to buildings and building automation specifically. So welcome to the group. And Paul, let me just bring this up, and there you go.
Oh, thanks, Anto. And thanks for reorganizing my slide a little bit, concentrating it into one. Well done. So if you guys hear any pounding in the background, there is a lot of construction work going on, and it feels like most of it's in the unit above me in my condo today. So my apologies for the background noise. So I have a number of consulting gigs, and one of the ones I'm working on is with a Canadian company called Lumen Ultra, and they have developed a pretty unique technology that they believe is going to help the re-entry process into buildings, commercial spaces of all kinds, from restaurants to hotels to airlines. And what it is, it's the ability to measure, take samples from high touch areas in a building, and within an hour detect whether there's SARS-CoV-2 present in the space. And the idea there is if there are surface remnants of SARS-CoV-2, then it's a 99.9% chance that somebody has been in that space with COVID-19. And to put it in a little bit of perspective here, this product was built on the back of clinical testing. This company provides over 95% of the clinical testing for the country of Canada. And product's been available about 12 weeks, and they've booked 60 million in sales for this product already. So it's like really ramping up. Most of you guys know me. My background is building automation and building controls, a lot of multi-site retail. Was the president of American Automatrix for a while, a few years ago, sat on the board of the acquiring company, founded a company called Verisay and another company called CPC, which was a supermarket energy management system company. So this is a little bit off of my normal path. I know one of the investors who got me involved in this, and I've been helping them introduce this product or this technology to transportation, commercial buildings, hospitality over the last 2 or 3 months. So it's an interesting technology. It has the ability to measure the SARS-CoV-2 in air. I was actually talking to Tracy recently. The technology's there, but we don't have the sensing technology. So the actual physical sensor, as it is today, it's a manual group testing. You go in and you swipe a swab across a group of areas. You break the swab off, you put it in a test file, you place it in the machine. You have to wait for about 60 minutes and it will provide feedback whether it's a positive result or a negative. And the idea is if it's positive, then you know you have to go re-clean that area that you took the test from.
Okay.
So any questions or feedback on that?
I got a questions, John. So, you say they've been, very busy and booking a lot of sales. So you translate that into building owners are really focusing on their concern on surfaces. I mean, it seems logical, but I was just, aside from sales, I mean, is that the conversation? It's about the surfaces and building owners care about that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, building owners care about getting people back in their buildings and building confidence, I think, John. And, the largest commitment that the company's had is from a company called Welltower. They're a REIT that manages assisted care facilities around the world. And so, as you can imagine, knowing the data and the statistics around assisted care facilities, they're all about making sure that the cleaning processes that are going on in the building are actually being effective. On Lumen Ultra's website, there's a case study where an assisted care facility just cleaned the facility and asked our team to come in and do a test. And 13 out of 14 locations still had SARS-CoV-2. They had to change the cleaning product and change the process. We went back in and retested, and all but one location was free of SARS. So I always look at this from my personal view on this, and I'm not an employee of the company, so I can be quite neutral, is, there's been kind of a downplay of the surface transmission of the virus, but they still tell us to wash our hands. The guys that are doing cleaning are making more money than anyone right now. They're fogging airplanes at night. And why would they do that if it was strictly an airborne issue? So, the reality is surface transmission is real. There's tons of articles, and you guys want to hook up with me separately. I've got a spreadsheet full of articles and news programs that have covered this subject. But I think to answer your question, it's about people really, it's commercial. They want people back in their buildings. And if they can tell their employees that they're testing, not just cleaning, but they're cleaning and testing, it's a really positive message to give to people coming back into their offices or people coming back into a restaurant that's had a kind of an outbreak.
Hey, Paul, it's Mark Peacock, a question. So you do the test, and as you said, basically within an hour or so, you can get the results. Where is those results? Where does that data then go after you've got a positive or negative finding? What do they do with the data?
Currently, there's not an enterprise solution that's been implemented by the company. They have that for other things. You guys will be most familiar with Legionella probably, or Salmonella, but mostly Legionella in commercial buildings. And this platform that they have can test for multiple microbiologies in the same unit. It lands on the PC that's present and connected to the machine right now, Mark. So that's an opportunity for the company going forward. But as you can imagine, this particular company had a forecast of like $19 million for this year, and they're going to do 160 million in sales. So it's like they're in a major repivot right now and trying to catch up with some of this stuff.
Hey, Paul,
Thanks.
I'm assuming that the testing is mostly in like an office environment for maybe the desks, maybe the bathroom and kitchen surfaces. Is that the main focus? As opposed to like in a retail environment where you got all kinds of product on store shelves, they're not going to be able to test that. So I just want to get sort of narrow where this fits.
Yeah, it's, this surface testing or air testing when we get there is really going to be very strategic. Steve, it's like you've got to have a plan going in and a checklist. So, you've got to know that these are the high touch areas. So like in a food retail store, it'd be the checkouts, it'd be the service desk, it would be the washrooms, the handles on the reach-in cases where they have the doors on them. And then you just have to limit it, so you got to be careful because it's about $25 a test. Now, just to be clear, a test
is
could
that
be 20.
each,
A test
like
could be
one
20.
surface is $25. It could be, like say the towel, the towel rack or the handle on a door is $25.
No, we do like the NBA does. We do what's called group testing. So you would go in and test all the handles on the refrigerator doors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got a positive, you would tell your cleaning crew, you got to go back and clean all the refrigerator doors. You do the washrooms. So you could do multiple surfaces in washrooms. That's one test. You could do all the checkouts, for example, with one test. It's just about how resolute you want to be.
Okay.
The reality is if you've got 100 locations and you got 100 physical locations and buildings, and you're going to try to do 100 tests a day, that's not going to be practical.
Right.
So you've got to be strategic with it.
To me, Paul, when we were talking before, this is a little less about the actual surface transmission. And to me, I think the real value in this is a bit of a surrogate or a fingerprint that somebody has been in that facility that has had it. And, in the lack of human testing or whatever it might be, this is a backstop to all of that. And, proof positive, somebody has been in there that is positive in a carrier. So that has as much, if not more value, I would think in the big picture of things than almost any of this.
Yeah, there's a link to a University of Oregon evaluation white paper, video white paper, if you will. And their statement is you can't test every person, but you can test every building.
Right.
And that's the reality of it. And just as a reminder, folks, like this virus will sit on a hard surface maybe for 3, 4, 5 hours, maybe longer live. It'll die, but the DNA or the RNA doesn't. So it could have been a week ago that somebody was in that building with COVID-19. You might not have active virus, but you, like exactly what Tracy said, we know that somebody's been in that space. And so it's the beginning of a kind of a tracking mechanism, like, okay, who was on that floor of that building? Who was in that room? Do we need to take people out of that space? Lumen Ultra's own building on the 8th floor 3 weeks ago, we test the building once a week. And we found on the 8th floor of the building in New Brunswick that we had a positive test. And it was what drove testing of the employees, determining who was on that floor, re-cleaning that floor, retesting that floor, and then allowing employees to come back. So that's kind of the strategy of the environmental testing.
Mm-hmm. Think about an application in a school situation where there's no way that you can necessarily enforce testing on every student that goes back to school. But how easy would it be for an administration to test, drinking fountains and doorknobs and things at a school and know whether they've got an infected student? It's
Yeah,
such
the way
a,
they're doing, the folks that are doing the pods in the schools, they're trying to keep students in the same classroom, have lunch in the same classroom. Even if it's once a week on the weekends, you test the desk surfaces in classrooms, you know that someone in that pod during that week has arrived and had COVID-19.
yeah.
So I'd like to invite Rick to tell us what he's doing. Rick, if Rick Ralston, if you can tell us about what you're doing, I'll show us the slide that you provided us. All yours, Rick.
You're muted, Rick, just so you know.
Rick, you are muted still. Oops. I think I accidentally muted you back. I'm sorry. You have to unmute again.
There we are. Sorry about that, guys. Great to see some Canadian technology there. Yeah, I'm Rick Ralston, based in Vancouver with Built Space, and I think we've talked to many of the people on the panel over the last several months, but Anto asked me to just give a little bit of update on some of the things that we've been doing, and you know, very specifically towards the cleaning. Back in March, actually, started working with our own landlord in our own commercial building here in Vancouver to put in the Built Space platforms for cleaning. And on the lower right of your screen, you can probably see an example of a dashboard where for this building, we've put in QR codes for in each of the washrooms, in the elevator cabs, in the common areas, and we're tracking through the Be Clean, which is a national cleaning company in Canada. Their staff are using our app to track the contract specified work that was done for cleaning in each space, and they loved it. The cleaning team picked it up very quickly, and we're now at a point where Be Clean is implementing across their portfolio and doing it entirely themselves. They're creating the new building, setting up the stacking plan for their cleaning requirements, and training their staff, and away they go. So that's just one example of what I really call proactive operations and maintenance. And you know, in this case, each service intervention might be, you know, a couple of minutes in a washroom or an elevator cab, but we're tracking that and making that available with the geolocation, with the name and time and date of the work that was completed. So it can be used, the data can be used for contact tracing if required, and for verifying all the cleaning that's gone on. We've also, in the past week, just announced a partnership with QMC, which is a Canadian, actually a US utility sub-metering company. And it's interesting because we've now crossed the handover from construction, installation, commissioning into operations digitally. And QMC is now accepting meters to their warehouse from the manufacturer, entering them by scanning the serial number of each meter into Built Space, and then tracking that through installation and commissioning of the meters, and handing the data off to the utility company so that they can manage both the physical meters themselves and the data that goes into it. So a couple of really exciting announcements over the last couple of weeks towards the whole software as a service, implementing the service supply chain. And I guess the one last thing I wanted to point out, in the lower left, there's a screenshot of our app, which is very customizable to any specific asset class and procedure. But we have something that we call the magic blue box, which in this case displays the value of the V-belt that's used in this particular piece of equipment. And you'll notice that there's an order button at the bottom that's blue. And we're now doing is integrating the Built Space app with Amazon Business, so that we can actually place order and have the parts or material delivered digitally as well. So again, working towards how do we make the entire service supply chain more efficient within facilities. And so just thought I would share a few of those examples, and if anybody has any thoughts or questions.
So before we do that, just to let everybody know that these slides are at the end of the slides are on Monday Live, and after right at the end is some links, the one that Paul mentioned, and links that Rick mentioned. So all of that is available to you. So let's throw it back to some questions.
I had a quick question for Rick. Rick, how difficult would it be to incorporate test results from Paul's thing into your platform to kind of close the loop on all of this?
A lot of us was thinking that.
Yeah,
absolutely. As Paul, that's the test results can be updated directly into the application with the specific location of that cleaning of the test done, and that can be shared on a dashboard or in the next business process, which might be, okay, we're doing a deep cleaning on this group of spaces.
Just seems
like we
like
have a call on the calendar.
Yeah. It's the old adage, right? I'm sure everybody's thinking that you manage what you measure, and until you close that loop on this whole thing, it's an open loop sort of a control mechanism. So it just seems logical that the two of you are working in concert with one another.
Both Canadians.
Yeah, both Canadians.
Wow.
Canadian companies, be careful.
Yes.
The magic blue box is very interesting for us, because health and safety and what was the result of the last inspection or test is designed to show up when that person is on site, so that if there was a case of hey, we found a positive COVID-19 test result, we can make the next person aware of that before they go in unprotected.
So Paul or Rick or both, I think obviously the stuff that you guys are doing, extra testing, extra cleaning and everything else, which is great for where we are and what we're trying to do. How much do you think building owners will continue doing this after COVID does taper off? And do you think there's a heightened awareness of just cleanliness generally, or is this just a blip?
Well, I think it's far beyond just cleanliness. I think it's the pandemic has fundamentally changed the need to go from reactive, wait till it breaks kind of operations and maintenance to, hey, we have to be on top of this and we have to manage change in these buildings. And, you know, that's something that I don't think will go away. And you know, we see it in cleaning, I mean, airborne or surface, you know, the target keeps changing, but ventilation is just as critical or more critical even than hard surface cleaning. Who knows? You know, it's a debate that everybody's having, but in either case, we have to proactively manage that.
Yeah, I would say I can't answer that question because if I could answer that question, I could answer others and I wouldn't have to be on this call. But, you know, it just depends on how people adjust. I think, you know, this little repeat here, but, you know, the new norm, I think, is now there's an awareness that just because people say they have a clean place for you to visit doesn't mean they do. And you can go to like most major corporations websites today and they talk a lot about cleaning, but not very many are saying, yeah, we clean and then we test to be sure that it's clean. And I think when this catches on, and it's catching on now, the press is picking it up. People are becoming more aware of it. I can tell you that Lumen Ultra is spending $1 million starting this week on a consumer marketing campaign to educate people on this technology, that it's available and places like restaurants can have it. I think there's a possibility that it will carry on for a long time, but there's also a possibility, because we tend to be tolerant as a world of people, that once once we have vaccines and we're down the road 2 or 3 years, it may be less of a focus. So I think nobody really knows. So
does this add to, we've had this discussion on our previous Monday Lives about COVID-19 building ratings and so one would assume that if I'm employing this technology, that again, that's going to help towards meeting 3 or 4 ratings groups that are out there now trying to rate COVID healthy buildings.
I would expect that, Mark. Absolutely. I would expect that there'll be a sticker on the door that this building is tested regularly for the presence of SARS-CoV-2, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? If you're spending the money to do it, it's just going to be part of any developers or building owners campaign to bring people back into the business.
But wouldn't that be, rather than a sticker in the building saying that it's been tested regularly, shouldn't that be, this building was tested yesterday and the results was good?
Yeah, that live label that we discussed before.
Right.
I mean, this is LEED certification for COVID, right? There are, if you look at all the different levels and technologies that you could deploy in a building, from temperature taking to, you know, filters, better filters, air turnovers, there's just so many different measures that you can take, all of which should add to your point score of how well you're managing your building, and how, you know, and it's never an absolute guarantee, but what you're effectively saying is we are improving the odds that our building is as clean as possible by taking, you know, this many measures. And those who go and do all of it and close the loop, you know, that's a higher point score than somebody who doesn't, let's say.
As we mentioned before, though, too, is trust is becoming a currency. And I think that's what you're investing in when you're buying this kind of technology, is you are basically exposing that trust and making people feel a lot more comfortable coming into these facilities. So I think that's what I'm saying, is that trust we will actually invest in any concept that will make the people feel better about going into these buildings.
You know, it's interesting that Anna and I were on a call last week, or the week, I think it was the week before, no names. And as we were learning more about this particular facility, question was brought up about cleaning the bathrooms. And the question was brought up, how often do you clean the bathrooms or whatever? And unfortunately, this particular facility really couldn't answer that question, and which was kind of disheartening because obviously it was a very social facility. And I'm assuming that both Rick's and Paul's thing, you can get the time of day, the number of times it was clean. And one would assume that you can benchmark that, you know, from 12 to 3, this particular bathroom is very active. And at 3:05, we want to make sure somebody's in there cleaning this place.
And I want to see that score on TripAdvisor, Mark.
There you go. I like it. I like it.
But we also need to do ventilation, indoor air quality, and plumbing, and Legionella is a huge problem. Like, it's not just one thing. It's general proactive maintenance operations of the buildings, and I think that's going to become the new norm, as you say.
Yeah, you know, I was going to throw out there about thinking about this at a citywide level, or as a proxy for community spread. And I think Tracy was going there a little bit, that this is not just about the building, but if you could sell this to a neighborhood, a city that went from building to building, then you would get this feeling of whether it's a hot spot or not a hot spot right now. And then I sort of think about the Mark Cuban thing about if I were a 17-year-old starting a business. And if I were a 17-year-old starting a business, you know, with the luminosity thing, I would sell it at the smart city level and say, yeah, you know, for $25 a pop, I can tell you every day where there's been COVID and where there's not.
And we're actually proposing that to the schools here in British Columbia, and to actually the public buildings in Ontario, to say, hey, you know, you need to start somewhere, and, you know, to give you the confidence to reopen or to get the kids back in the school or whatever. You know, this is the tool that you need. It's simple. You know, we're talking like 70 cents a month to do a classroom with this kind of technology.
I think Paul needs to give every Uber driver one of those test kits, and that add-on that they can do. For an extra $5, you can get your building checked while I'm there.
Yeah.
So
Teresa, to respond to your comment real quick, sorry, Anto, but one of those, I don't think it's in those links, but if you reach out to me, I can't remember, NBC or ABC got their hands on like a bunch of these test kits, laboratory versions where you got to mail it in, and they went to multiple cities in the United States. And amazingly, the test rate around Miami was about like 2 in 10 surfaces showed COVID-19. And in New York, it tracked exactly to their case percentage. So you're absolutely right. You can do group testing, and it correlates exactly to the positive test results that are going on in those cities.
Let's go to Sturgis with it.
Yeah.
You can go to Sturgis with it. I'm not going to Sturgis with it.
Me neither. But anyway, I couldn't resist.
You know, though, I was thinking about this whole thing, and infectious diseases are not a new thing, and locking down facilities at different levels of control is not a new thing. It's no different than data security or anything else. It's a matter of how much of a return you get by the investment you make to go there, right? So infectious disease protocol applied to buildings and using building controls in the general public, as opposed to just labs, let's say, or hospitals. I don't see why that wouldn't be a good practice, or a good, you know, that thinking to me seems like it should stick around as one of those things that came out of this pandemic.
Yeah, that was kind of my point earlier, Tracy. I'd like to see that on TripAdvisor when maybe it's on Google, when I route to if you ask me to come to your building, I'll click on Google. The first thing I want to know is how good Tracy's building is.
Yeah, we looked at that in our food temperature monitoring. Could we publish that to Yelp? That's another form of that.
Brings up a question that John Hester has put up on the Q&A about liability and all of this. Somehow these discussions always end up here. So, Paul, Rick, you want to comment on that?
Paul, you want to?
Sure. Sorry, I'm sorry I was muted. Yeah, I mean, it has been a challenge with the end users. Like when we're talking to a supermarket chain or a large restaurant chain, you know, I'm like, my kind of role as a consultant is to kind of get feedback from the marketplace and who's going to want more of this stuff and what are they willing to pay for it, those sorts of things. And I found that it's really hard to get executives at the end users like on board to talking about that. They do see there's a liability concern, whether it's real or not. I can't answer that, I'm not a lawyer. But who's really been jumping on board with this are like the cleaning companies, the services companies, large FM companies that have cleaning as a service. They want to take this to the end user and validate that the work they're doing is quality work. So it's really more about that so far. But I think a lot of that is a result of lack of consumer knowledge. And I think this effort that at least Lumen Ultra is making to educate like the consumer, the end user, is going to be really important to the company. One of the big challenges they have is being a $12 million company jumping to a $150 million company in, you know, a period of a year, and people just don't know who they are or what they do.
I guess I would add too that you know, the whole idea of us as a technology company saying, hey, we're going to certify something as clean is not something we want to do. And it's really not our responsibility. I think that, you know, there's liabilities for the facilities operators and for the cleaners if they are not doing something that they should be doing. But what we can help them with is to demonstrate that they are complying with best practices, or at least reasonable practices, which is in fact protection for them, not the other way around.
This is going to be years, I think, in the legal community trying to define this, and we saw the same thing in the food industry when we started implementing temperature tracking. Mm-hmm. There's a group of owners who believe, you know, this is the way to go. It's safer for our customers. You know, it's just the right thing to do. And then there are a group of owners who unequivocally said, if I do that, that is trackable, subpoena, you know, data subject to subpoena, and it will cause me more harm than it will help. So it's really split in terms, I think, of the mindset of different, you know, probably different markets will be different, but boy, that is such a good question. And I don't know if I know which way it'll go, but it seems clear to me that if there's not some legislation to loosen up the ability for somebody to twist the data into a negative, there could be a fear side of this that could keep this from really taking hold in the marketplace.
Yeah, I would say that we haven't seen that. You know, just with the cleaners, for example, that we're working with, you know, they're very much, hey, you know, we need to be able to prove that we did what we said and what they have a legal obligation to do. So, you know, I've talked to cleaners that have had the opposite view, but, you know, I don't think in the end of the day, those are the people that are going to be winning that game.
It's also a revenue opportunity for them. Let's face it. I mean, that's the capitalist side of this. It's one more thing that they can differentiate themselves with. And hence we have HACCP, right, Tracy? So like now a supermarket operator can't not have that data. Like right. They have to because it's legislated. So, you know, you're right. Maybe it'll go that way. Maybe when enough people are aware that for $15 a test, like that's where we're going, right? And for 10 minutes of work, you can test a facility to make sure it's been cleaned properly. It will become the standard and it will be legislated.
Yeah. And we're seeing compliance legislation for Legionella already at like locally here. So I think you'll see more of that.
So Trevor Duke asked roughly the pricing of the Lumen Extra in ballparks. How many zeros?
Yeah, not so bad. Lumen Ultra, the links on the website for the meeting notes. But so the way it works is it's like razors and razor blades is the best analogy I can give you, right? So the razors come in like 3 flavors. They come in like a 8 port, a 16 port, and then for laboratories we have a 96 port networkable device. So we're not really thinking of that in this group. So think of a 8 or a 16 channel device, which could do obviously the SARS, but it could also do salmonella. So if there's a dining area or food prep area or something like that, it could also do Legionella. About between 13 and 15 grand between those 2 devices, depending on which. So that's the only CapEx you have. And then the tests come in batches of like 96 in a kit, 480 in a kit. And that's what the $25 a test is. That's for the reagents that you use and the swabs and the materials that you use. The beauty of what these guys have done to me is it's the only portable qPCR is the technology they use. So it's highly accurate. It's not what's called ATP, which is what like the restaurateurs use to see if surfaces are dirty. This is singling out specific microorganisms, and to do it in less than an hour is like the big deal. This is like a toolkit that the tech carries in to the space, opens up the box, and everything is there in a kit to do the test in that facility that they're visiting.
Is this offered as a service, software as a service? Can I basically buy from this company a monthly contract or a yearly contract?
We're a parts and smarts company. So like we don't actually do the testing. So like my suggestion would be that like if you were in the services business, then you would offer it as a service. So that CapEx piece would be embedded in the regen, the razor blades. And in fact, we sell it that way as well. So if you came to us and said, I need 1 million tests, I can sell them to you for $20 a test, or I could sell them to you for 25 and I'll throw in the equipment that you need. So it's just a game of numbers, to be honest.
Telling you, that's where Uber comes in.
Right.
Built space.
Yeah,
exactly.
Paul, very quickly, does the technician require any sort of training or certification to do the test?
Not certification, but certainly training. And I will say that my experience with this business is they have a lot of tools. They've been doing this for 25 years. So they've been training people to test wastewater and drinking water and cooling tower water for years and years. And this is just an extension of that. So this is a very experienced group of guys. And so like, yeah, the training's pretty straightforward, but you need to have training.
I love the Uber reference, because then I can just phone Uber and ask them to bring over their test kit and do a test. And also I assume that the driver has been tested.
That works.
Yeah, I like that plan. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions? So, okay. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. I think it's been a really great conversation. Couple of really sort of interesting angles. And thank you, Rick, and thank you, Paul. And anybody want to make any closing comments? We have about a minute to go.
I wouldn't mind. I've got an article just going out to Connected Contractor, and it's about turning control freaks like us into Scrum Masters. And I think we have to get our heads around that. We basically, we've all kind of gone with this products, and as you saw, just tossed around the page here, the whole idea of Google here, that testing, ideas are meshing and they're evolving in thin air, virtually in thin air. So we need to completely change how we manage, and that's what this next article is about. And I'm seeing that that really what our task is it's basically combining, collaborating the communities and their competencies, which I can never say, but that word there. So anyway, yeah, I think we've got a really great opportunity here, and lots of room for change and lots of room to grow. And I've dug out an old article that Brad White, one of our contributing editors, wrote 3 years ago, calling out to us that we had to change our management to look more like the software people we've become. So that's my message.
Okay, that's a great place to end it. So thank you, everybody. And video will be up later tonight. And we shall see you again next Monday on Monday Live. Bye-bye, all.
All right, thanks for the invite.
Bye-bye.